Today's class, we're going to start with a brief discussion of a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. And then I'm going to walk you through how to assess information. So this book is full of information. It's a book about running, shockingly, called Born to Run. But it addresses lots of different pieces of information, or lots of different things about running. So it talks about barefoot running and running as part of a culture and running as part of evolution and running in terms of like ultra marathons, not just regular marathons, but ones that can be 50 or 100 miles long. And it goes through lots of different angles and draws some fairly strong conclusions, but that are not necessarily agreed to by other researchers. So I want to start by saying I actually really enjoyed this book. It was really, really interesting. And as far as I can tell, all of the statements it makes are true, but the conclusions in the book itself is fairly contentious. And what I want to start by focusing on is why. How can a book say a bunch of true things, be all truth, and still be debated? And how do you approach information where in a world where that's the case? How do you look at a book and decide if you're going to believe it, or if you're going to question it, or if you're going to judge it in any way? And my answer to that in a really brief way is to question everything. But I'm going to go through it a little deeper. So finding your own answers and never trusting just one source and how to evaluate sources. And that's kind of where this class is going. So, Born to Run, good book. And a very interesting book from a teaching perspective. So if we go from this book as a starting point, a good question would be, is barefoot running a good thing? Because that's one of the biggest things it talks about is barefoot running and the benefits and the values and the strength behind barefoot running. I need a place to put my papers when I'm done with them. So this is a question that comes from the book, but it's actually not a great research question. And I think most of you would know that. Most of you are used to typing into Google. You know what makes a good research question. This is a little too broad and a little too iffy, like sort of wishy-washy. So is barefoot running a good thing? Barefoot running is a clear topic. Good thing is a little fuzzier. So we're going to make it a little better and just narrow it down a bit and focus it a bit and say, what is the impact of barefoot running on endurance? It's specific without being too specific. This question is clear, and it can be answered. So that whole good thing concept in the last question really wasn't answerable. Good thing is so subjective that it's a hard answer or hard piece to deal with. This question still has some room for interpretation, some scope for different kinds of outcomes. So the impact of barefoot running could be in terms of distance, it could be in terms of injuries, it could be speed, it could be like wear and tear. So there's all sorts of different kinds of outcomes you can come for this question, and that's okay. It's just managing the actual overall scope of a question. So good thing, too broad. Wear and tear on knee joints, probably too narrow. So we're going to go with just impact of barefoot running on endurance. From this question, so I'm going to start by saying we are going to do this research ourselves. So we have a source that says barefoot running is a good thing. And I don't necessarily think that's untrue, but there's certainly a lot of qualifiers to it that we need to be aware of. And that awareness comes from looking at a source, taking its conclusion, and then going to verify it from other sources. So we're going to verify it by doing this research question. So what is the impact of barefoot running? If you're going to search that in Google, you would probably take a couple of pieces from it and type them in. Like you wouldn't type in what is the impact of barefoot running on endurance. First of all, because that would be tedious and take a while, and second of all, because it's not actually a good way to approach searching. Got to be a little more tight. So keywords. Every research question you ask in university should have 2 to 4-ish keywords. So I mean, it could be more. I wouldn't say typically one keyword is enough, but 2 to 4. And each of your keywords needs to be 1 to 2 words long. And I mean, sometimes it's more. Sometimes you get 3 or 4 word long keywords. But 1 to 2 is a good range. So we have barefoot running, which is a 2 word long keyword, and we have endurance, which is 1 word long. So just keeping it tight. So yeah, in this question, barefoot running and endurance are our keywords, our key concepts, the ideas that we're going to be searching in the databases. Once you've identified your keywords for a search, the next step is to think about different ways to say them. So what are your synonyms for those keywords? And if it's a topic you're really familiar with, you may already know the synonyms, you may know the other language that's used to describe that term. Or if you just really, really have a big vocabulary, you might know these things. But if you're not super familiar with it, or if you don't just come up with those synonyms all by yourself really easily, there are sources you can use. So a really obvious one is going to a thesaurus. Thesauruses are lists of synonyms on topics, so that makes them a really, really good tool for this. They do have the weakness in that they tend to focus on terms that are used in common speech. So endurance is probably words in a thesaurus, but barefoot running is probably too specific and just too specific to find in a thesaurus. You'll need to go other places for that. And thesauruses are available freely online. Thesaurus.com is excellent. It even ranks your terms in terms of sort of relevance to how close it is. So if you have endurance, it'll go closest to the word endurance to farthest away in terms of synonyms. Other ways to get synonyms would be like going to a database like Sport Discus and just typing in your word and seeing what other words appear in the results you get. So what's coming up in the title, in the abstract, in the subject terms you see in the records. I'm just kind of scanning there to see if you get something. And the last one, and I'm always very careful when I say the word Google in terms of actually using it, but you can go to Google and just type in like barefoot running and seeing what comes up as words in those results. And that's what I did for this particular example. I'm not going to do it while I'm speaking in the video. But when I searched it in Google, I came up with four alternative terms to barefoot running, or 3 alternative terms. So I came up with minimalist running, which was popular, natural running, and unshod running were the 3 other terms I came up with on top of barefoot running. And I'm going to use those in the search I'm going to show you in just a couple minutes. So we have our question, we have our keywords, we have our synonyms. Now we need to think about how we're going to manipulate those in the database. So barefoot running is a good keyword, but it could be more than what it is. So barefoot running could just as easily be barefoot runner or barefoot runners. And we can type those into the database ourselves, but there's a faster way to do it. And to tell the database to search all of those variations on its own, and that's by using truncation, which basically tells the database to take the root word, like barefoot run, put that little star at the end, and then search for barefoot run and its endings. So barefoot run, barefoot runner, barefoot runners, unshod run, unshod runner, unshod runners, unshod running. So you get those variations without typing them all in. The balance to using that truncation tool, so that little asterisk, is that you need to be aware of how far you're truncating. So you have to keep a word to a certain length. So if you wanted to search tubes, I know this is a really weird example, but it's the one that comes to mind. If you want to search the word tubes, you want like tubing and tube and tubing, tubes and tubing. You can't just shorten it to tub, because then you get all sorts of other weird things that you really don't want to get into. So you have to have a certain number of letters before you can truncate effectively. But you also want to make sure you don't truncate too late. So can't come up with an example right now, but they're like, you don't just want to include an S, you want to make sure you cut off any ending that might include like an ing or an ed or an es, so you just want to be a little more inclusive at that end as well. So in our case, we're going to go barefoot run, minimalist run, unshod run, and I think the other one was natural run when we do our truncation in the database. And the last piece about how you're going to manipulate your keywords in the database is by including phrase searching, which tells the database anytime you have a keyword that is more than one word long, like endurance running, like barefoot running, you need to wrap it in quotation marks to tell the database that it's one keyword. So you're going to search barefoot running, not barefoot, and then running later on. So using quotation marks and wrapping your search term in quotation marks tells the database to treat it as if it's one word and to search it together in the order that you put it in. And it's really, really, really important. Like more than anything else, those quotation marks make a huge difference in the results you get, and they really, they prevent you from getting 15,000 results when you really only have like 20. And that's maybe an exaggeration, but that's the idea. It keeps your number of results relevant and contained. So we have our question, we have our keywords, we have our synonyms, we have our truncation, and we have our quotation marks. Those are your basic components to searching, and they're not super difficult. Like they're all pretty straightforward. You have a fairly good idea of most of them already, but now I'm going to actually go into a database and use them. So, sport discus. We all know and love sport discus. We all use it. It is the go-to database for all things kinesiology. And it is the one I'm going to go into today. But before I go into it, I just want to highlight or remind you that there are other databases out there than sport discus. Sport discus is great. It is a concentrated place to find kinesiology or fitness or health research. But every field we engage in at this point, anything related to health at all, is very, very interdisciplinary. So don't hesitate to go into other databases. So sport discus is great. Just about any topic you research, you should be using sport discus. But you could also be using something like PubMed or sociological abstracts, or CAB Direct is a database that's very recreation end of kinesiology. It could be ERIC, which is an education database. So there's lots of other options. Don't just stick to sport discus because it's the one that comes to mind first. So that all being said, we are going to use sport discus because it is the one that you always want to go to. Just go to other ones too. So, sport discus. There's lots of different ways to get to our databases. I'm going to show you one, although I'm sure you've already found several others, or you've got your way to get into there. So this is lib.umb.ca. It is our main website page. You can get into sport discus using the databases tab, or you can get into it using our subject guides tab. I like to show the subject guides one, just because it is a place where you're going to find multiple databases that relate to your field, not just the one database you know already. So under kinesiology, you'll find these top article and research databases. So you have sport discus, so leisure, recreation, and tourism is that CAB Direct I mentioned. PubMed, Social Abstracts, Academic Search Premier, ERIC. These are some core databases, and there's a few more if you click on View All Results. But again, we're going to sport discus because it is the database. Okay, so sport discus. You've seen it, you love it, I hope. You use it, I hope. But we're going to use it. So start by just typing in those keywords that I talked about already. We have barefoot run. I'm going to put that asterisk in and those quotation marks. So quotation marks because it's 2 words long. Asterisk because there's possible endings. So barefoot running, barefoot runner, barefoot runners gets included in that search term as I've typed it in the database. But like I said, I have multiple synonyms, and you should have multiple synonyms for most topics. And the way to include those is by using something called a Boolean operator, in particular the Boolean operator OR. So I'm going to type in OR, natural run, or unshod run, or what was the last one? Barefoot, natural, unshod, minimalist. So again, I have quotation marks and asterisks for all of those search terms because I'm cutting off run at the RUN stage of it. And or connects the words, and it tells the database to find any article that uses at least one of those terms. So we're going to find any article that has any of those in it, which is just a way to really scrape for all of its content. And if I ran a search now, I'm going to guess I wouldn't get tons of results because it is still a fairly new topic. But I am going to add in that second piece about endurance. So if I do endurance, I could add in more terms. I could use or distance or stamina. So there's other words I can use there too. And that's just a really, really good way to get as much of the content of the database that's on that topic as possible. So this search will actually run it'll find articles that have Barefoot Run in distance or Unshod Run in endurance. It just takes those pieces and combines them in a way that makes sense in terms of searching. And is the easiest, fastest way to do things. So just to really, really underscore this, when you're searching, you have your keywords, and your keywords, your separate keywords. So in this case, in Barefoot Running and endurance, they go in different boxes in Sport Discus. So they go under the first two search bars. When you have synonyms for words, they stay within a box and they're connected with or. So I hope that was clear. Certainly if there's questions, feel free to ask me or just rewind and watch the video again. Hopefully that answers them. But it's really very, very straightforward and really does a much better job of getting your information for you, which is important because if you have the best articles, your papers are easier to write. I know that certainly when I was in my undergrad, I had to make do with articles that weren't the best. And it's harder. Just find the good stuff to begin with. Put a couple extra minutes into your search, and you'll save probably an hour or more on your paper. Or at least I think that's the way, that was the way it was for me. So my advice, take it or leave it, but I think it's sound anyway. So from here, I'm going to press search and really hope I get results because I did not test the search out before I came. Oh, look, 44. That's good. So yeah, that's a good search. We have foot loading, foot strike patterns, women minimalist running, distance runners, endurance. I'm not really reading the titles, but I'm seeing the keywords I wanted. So that looks pretty good to me. Once you have your search done, so that's our search. It was clean and tight and good. Once you've done your search, you have some options. You can go right into the literature, which is perfectly fine. Or you can look at narrowing it down a bit. If you get too many results, there's certainly ways to narrow it. Or you can start evaluating the actual articles. So I'll show you how to do both those things, and I'll talk about these limiters. So if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you get these refine results options, which are in some cases great, and in some cases not so much. I certainly like the peer-reviewed button. It does its job fairly well, and it means you're going to get pretty much only research articles. The date limiter does exactly what you think it's going to, but don't just limit by date because you feel like it or because you have too many results. Make sure there's a reason behind it. And reasons could be that the topic has changed over time. So if your topic has evolved, and you know it's evolved fairly significantly, do narrow it down to where you think the most current chunk of it is going to be. In this case, it's actually fairly good to narrow it down because the research on running has changed over time. Initial research on running might have been done by companies who were invested in convincing you to run in shoes, whereas barefoot running is a fairly new topic. So that could be a change over time, and I don't know this for sure, but I would say it's probably very much the case that the motivations behind this research have changed in the last 30 or 40 years. And certainly barefoot running is a fairly new concept in the research world, although in terms of actual global practice, it's not super uncommon. So we just narrow it down a little bit. Let's go to like the last 20 years is probably fairly conservative. 41 didn't make much of a difference because really most of the research on barefoot running is fairly current. And my advice is to stop using limiters at this point. In my perspective, those are the only two that really do what you want them to do effectively. And I didn't click peer reviewed, but I can. I don't think it'll make much of a difference. Oh, it made a 10 result difference, so not bad. The rest of them I find you either don't ever need or aren't really going to do what you hope they're going to. So publication, no one except a librarian cares what journal it came from. And honestly, as a librarian, I don't care much. Thesaurus terms, this is not bad. It'll tell you, like if I clicked on athletic shoes, I would know that any article that's coming up has athletic shoes as a significant component of its topic. And that's kind of what that does. It says there are 11 articles in here that are mostly about running. But clearly, most of these articles are about running. So that's really not telling me as much as I want it to, and it will cut out things that I don't necessarily want to lose. So it's not bad in some cases, but do use it conservatively and only if you really need to. To me, 31 articles is nothing to go through. You just kind of scan down the page and you're good. But it is an option that's okay-ish sometimes. This is very much the same thing. I don't use these limiters much. Language, most articles in most databases are in English, or at least most of the articles in most of the databases that we subscribe to are in English because we are an English university. So you can click it and get only the English articles, but you're really only cutting out 2 articles, so that seems like more effort than it's worth. Although again, by all means, do it. Geography is a terrible limiter, do not touch it. I don't know how they catalog it. I don't know how they catalog for geography, and I just don't trust it to do what I want it to do. Yeah. Honestly, aside from peer review and date limiters, I don't touch these because I'd rather control the search myself. I'd rather know what's going on than trust the database. Then honestly, they're overrun by thousands and thousands and thousands of articles, and they can't necessarily keep up as well as they would like to, or as we would like them to. So yeah, I don't trust it. Doesn't mean it's not trustworthy. I recommend doing the search yourself and controlling for these things yourself, and not accidentally cutting out something that might be great. So that's what those are. Other ones you might see are things like limit results by gender or age, and I can tell you those certainly don't do what you think they're going to do at all. So if you get like a limit by gender and you have male and female and you click on female, you're still going to get articles with men in it. You're just not going to get articles that only have men in it. So it really, it narrows it in a little bit, but doesn't do a ton. Okay, I'll let the topic drop, but date and peer review are great. The other ones, just be aware that they're not as good as they look. Okay. So we've done our search, we've talked about limiters, we've applied a couple, I've applied a couple, we. So now it comes down to actually looking at the articles. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how you choose the articles that are relevant, because I think you already know that. Read the titles. If it looks relevant, read the abstract. From the format I have up in front of me, to read the abstract, I have to click on the title and go into the bigger record, which looks like this. You don't actually have to do that though. If you look at page options, you can have it show you the abstract as well. Oops, wrong one. Page options, detailed. And there's the abstract. It's very texty and very bulky, but not bad if you don't want to have to be clicking into every article. So that's certainly an option for you. Brief. I think I want to go for brief. And yeah, just pick the stuff that sounds like it's your topic. Really, really simple on that front. And I suppose know I want to talk about 2 more things. I just need to figure out what order I want to talk about them in. And if you're, so you do your search and you get like 10 results. You have some options. You can add more synonyms in there and broaden it out. You can take out one of your keywords. So say I decided to do what are the effects of barefoot running on endurance in male athletes, I might just take out the male part and only focus on endurance and barefoot running in general, just because male's a little bit too narrow. And then if I really wanted to include that male component, I could talk about endurance in male athletes, or like I can chunk that out separately. So that's one option, and it's just changing your search strategy. Another option is to take a couple of articles that are good, that you found that you liked, and check out their authors. So those authors might publish frequently on that topic, and you can go see what else they've published. You can look at the references in that article. So you read it, you find it's really great. Look at what they've cited, because they might have found stuff that you missed. And your last option is a really neat one, and you can use Google Scholar or Scopus. Scopus is one of our databases. You can use Google Scholar or Scopus. And there's a cited by feature. So if you look up the article you found, there's usually an option to find cited by, which takes you to a list of the people who've cited that article. So other people who also liked it and found it relevant. And you can look at what they've done. So it's kind of like the reverse of looking at the reference list. It's looking at who's referencing it. And that's a really, really neat way to do it, although it tends to be just a little bit less relevant, but it's still a good approach to go if you don't have what you need. So check out the authors, check out who's citing it, and check out what they've cited. Really, really good, really easy techniques once you've done your initial search. And the last thing I want to talk about while we're on this database is, okay, so you found your articles, you found out that you like the topic, you think it looks relevant. Now you have to judge the article itself. And there are lots of ways to do that. And I'm not going to talk about all of them because I could spend several hours doing that and still not cover it all. But there's some really easy ones. So I'm looking at this database. I have this first article here, and underneath it is something called Plum Metrics. And it gives a little bit of information. So I want to click on it. And I can see that it's been mentioned in Mendeley twice. It's been read twice, so it's not super popular. But seeing that it's a 2019 article, that's not really that shocking because it's only a few months old. Especially if it's only published in the last, if it's published more recently. If you look at others, so Plum Metrics for lots of articles. This one has all sorts of information. So 327 people have read the abstract in this database, or in EBSCO. It's been linked out to 103 times. People have read the article twice. And this is only within the scope that EBSCO can measure. So it's not like across the whole world this is all that's been used. This is what EBSCO can capture. It's been tweeted several times, which is an interesting measure. And these aren't perfect. They don't tell you that the article is great, but they do give you an idea of its popularity. And popularity can indicate a really good article. The dark side of that is it can also indicate a really popular article that's popular for the wrong reasons. The most obvious example being the article about the MMR vaccine and autism. That one's been really, really heavily cited, mostly because people are like, this is garbage. So it's a measure of article popularity, which can be a measure of quality, but it's not perfect, so do take it with a grain of salt, as you should take most things in academia. The goal here is to ask questions, and I'll talk more about sort of when to trust something, but that's one measure of popularity and often a measure of quality is those kinds of things, like how often it's been cited, how popular it is, like things to look at. Nothing's perfect, but things to look at. And the other side of that, which does sort of the other way of measuring article quality is to do it yourself. So ask yourself a bunch of questions. We call it, there's lots of names and lots of acronyms and lots of ways to do this. I personally like the CRAP test, just because the word appeals to me. I'm going to remember it later on. And it's ask yourself the questions. Currency. I'm going to get my notes for this. Is the article current? Was it recently published? Does its age matter? Relevance. Are you the person that this article is written for? Was it intended for an undergraduate student or a graduate student or the popular or the general public? And is it an appropriate level? So peer-reviewed research absolutely is an appropriate level. Children's books talk about running, not so much, though that's really obvious. That's a really extreme example. But do be aware, like if you don't think you should cite it in a paper, maybe don't cite it. And maybe don't take its word as gospel. Authority. Does the author have the credentials to say what they're saying? Are they sufficiently educated to make the conclusions they're drawing? And is the author likely to be unbiased on the topic? Or do they have a reason to want to argue for something specific? Accuracy. Accuracy is difficult, but it's the one that's the most important. It's the one that really, really is the judgment. So, is the information supported by evidence? Are they citing people and articles? It's important. You guys know it. That's why you're researching it. But check for it. And check to see if they formally cite things or just sort of mention things in passing. Has the information been reviewed or refereed? Certainly peer-reviewed articles, it's in the name. Books are reviewed. They have editors. With some balances there. So the more academic, the more verified the review might be. Don't trust anything that's a book, but they do go through an editorial process. Here's the big one. So when you're evaluating an article for accuracy, for quality, for can I trust this, check to see if you can verify it from another source. And that is the big one. Do not trust any one source ever. So Born to Run, great book. Lots of facts that are true and valid, but don't just trust its conclusions. Like, go somewhere else and find some corroborating evidence. Find some evidence that opposes it as well, and look at the quality of that evidence. So, yeah, just don't trust any. This is awful. Don't trust anybody. Ask questions. Draw your own conclusions. Educate yourself. And verify. Excuse me. When you're reading the article you're evaluating, does the language seem biased or emotional? Are they trying to tell you something that they want you to believe? Are they trying to convey information for you to evaluate yourself? And lastly, really, really obvious one, especially when you're evaluating like websites and stuff, are there spelling errors? Are there grammatical errors? Is it laid out neatly? Like, those things don't always indicate quality, but they are certainly something to watch out for. If the person can't spell barefoot running, they probably shouldn't be researching barefoot running, or they're probably not researching barefoot running. They're just writing about it. So, all things to consider. To me, the most important thing out of all of the crap test is, can you verify from another source? And have you looked at both sides of the argument? Because there's always two sides to an argument. Like, there's never, we totally agree on this one thing all the time across the world. If that were the case, science wouldn't be what it is. Okay, so P, the last letter in crap. Purpose. Does the author of whatever you're reading make the purpose of it clear? Is the information fact? Is it opinion? Is it propaganda? And does the point of view seem objective and impartial? So I mentioned these before, and you know this, right? If someone is trying to convince you of something, are they convincing you in a way that's saying, that sort of one track? You know, this is the only truth, there are no other truths? Or are they saying, you know, here's everything, and this is the truth because, like, in spite of these things, this is the truth, or the issues with these things are. So are they presenting it in a fair and impartial manner, or are they trying to pigeonhole you in one direction? Which is a bad thing, just clear. Okay. So that's articles. That is asking a question, picking your keywords, finding your synonyms, manipulating them so that you can use all of them. So using truncation and phrase searching, entering them into a database, using the Boolean operator or to combine synonyms, looking at the limiters on the side to figure out how you're going to use them, or if you're going to use them, evaluating the articles. This last step, where I bring up Zotero, is what to do with it once you've found it. And really, you guys can continue going on as you've been doing since you started university. You can do whatever you want. I want to bring up Zotero as an option because it is a really neat tool. And basically what it does is it manages your references. So say you find like 10 articles you like. Zotero is an application that will grab those articles from the internet, put them into Zotero, the desktop application itself. It will organize them. It will create citations for them. It will interface with Word or OpenOffice to create your citations and bibliography in your paper. It's not perfect. It will make mistakes. But it is a way to move from result on a page to citations in an article. And its biggest strength, I think, at this stage is sort of at your stage, is that it keeps track of that nitpickety stuff. So if you're writing a long paper for a class, it will keep track of, is this the first time you cited that paper or the second? Because that makes a difference in citation styles. First citations are always different from second citations. Did you cite something and then decide not to use it later and then remember to pull it out of your bibliography? Zotero will track that for you. Are you using a paper written by the same author in the same year, so you have the same citation, so say it's Smith 2019, and he's written 2 articles that are cited Smith 2019, it will do the A and B thing that differentiates them within a paper. It does that stuff really nicely. Yeah, so that's what it's all about. If you want to learn more about Zotero, you can go to the research guide that we have available on the library webpage. The link is on the screen. And it'll walk you through everything. It goes through how to download Zotero, how to create the connection to the browser, how to create your account, how to sync your account to your application, how to use Zotero in Word. So it goes through all of those things. It also talks at the end, the sort of last 2 tabs of that subject guide cover Zotero Groups, which is a research sharing tool. So if you're working in a group project and you all want to use Zotero, you can put them all in one place and it syncs well with the Word document. And the other tab is sort of tips, or like other tips and tricks, which is sort of other nifty things that Zotero does. If you get really into Zotero and decide you really like it, look at that tab and see what else is available to you. As you're just adjusting to Zotero, I don't super recommend it. But if you decide you want to use it and you really like it, those options are available as well. And I think that's all my content. So if there's any questions, obviously you can't ask me through a video, but you certainly can email me. I don't just disappear when this video's over. My email addresses are withers, WITHERS, @umb.ca. So contact me if there's any questions, and I will stop talking now. Cheers.